I can see this is going to fail on audience participation, so I'll start. As he says on there, I'm Mark Evans. I'm head of IT for a company called Rider Levett Bucknall. Rider Levett Bucknall are the third largest construction consultancy in the solar system. Other people may say on the planet, but we like to think big. And anyway, quantity surveyors sort of fall off in numbers once you get past our atmosphere, so we're fairly safe. The challenge. Due to the nature of our business, we have people who need to be in all sorts of places. They're not office-based generally. Construction is one of those boom or bust industries. And a few years ago when the banks decided that they were going to jettison all of our money, the knock-on effect on construction was quite harsh. We need to save the fee income that we were making. We need to make it go as far as possible to service our clients. We were also sort of fairly moribund in terms of our IT provision. And I'll stick my hands up to that one. We were doing what we'd always done and we weren't really looking at ways of improving. We were challenged to think about IT differently. We were challenged by our CEO. He didn't know what he was talking about, and he'll be the first one to admit that. But he said that everywhere he'd worked, everyone had the same sort of kit, and surely there was a better way of doing things. We had fairly strong relationships with our suppliers, but it was arm's length, and we didn't feel we were getting the best deal from them, and they didn't feel that they were getting the best sort of information from us to help them. So the challenge was to effectively tick all of these boxes. The context, as I said, construction is typically the first industry into recession and the last one out. Anyone here who owns their own home will know that there's been a depression in house prices. Well, if you imagine that that's sort of endemic within the construction industry, we couldn't carry on the way that we were going. We were spending money hand over fist, buying servers, buying systems, buying support. It just wasn't working, it wasn't scalable. We had considerable offices. Our Birmingham office, which is our head office, as you can probably tell from my accent, is basically like one of those offices you see on American TV shows. Huge, soulless, not welcoming. It's one of those places where if someone gets a cold, the entire workforce gets it. And if you extrapolate that out to our other offices around the country, they're all pretty much the same. We have lots of empty space. And you can walk in any day of the week and find that the occupancy was probably 30-40% of the workforce of that office. And you could always tell when it was a nice sunny day because the entire office would be empty of building surveyors. They'd be out on site or in the pub. It's building surveyors for you. Server sprawl. I think everybody will have seen this. We were in a situation where we were challenged to bring new services in. We didn't have headroom with any of the servers. We'd gone down the route of virtualization, but you still physically have to buy the kit. So, with server equipment that was sort of sitting there and it was more for decoration than any particular use, it was money that was just frittering away. We needed a solution to deal with that. Anyone who's aware of anything to do with building, and it doesn't mean that you have to be part of the construction industry. If you've seen the new sort of green scheme that the government's brought out where you can have your home insulated and whatever, you'll understand that construction is very much driven these days by the ecological effects of what we do. And the view was it's all very well and good building these fantastic homes which require no central heating and whatever because their green credentials are fantastic, when we're sitting there effectively using an entire power station to power our infrastructure. And as I've mentioned, some of the kits sitting there more as an ornament than anything useful. So we had to factor that in, and we were building our way, as you could probably tell, towards a solution which obviously culminated in me standing here. Throughout my management career, I've always tried to keep a lid on headcount. I am not someone who feels a great degree of pride in having hundreds and hundreds of members of staff working and reporting to me. However, we were in a situation where for the service sprawl that we were building and the services we were trying to implement, the skill sets weren't within the core team, and we would have to supplement the IT team to support the business. However, we're not fee earning and we are classed as overhead, obviously. And if the overhead grows, then it's just more weight. I mean, the overhead in terms of the business, the overhead in terms of IT staff is no different to the overhead in terms of rent. It's a cost. Excuse me. The solution. We went private cloud. It's always quite interesting when I come to these events and people are walking around and they're asking questions about, you know, what is AAS, you know, IPS, what is it? We partnered pretty much with InTechnology probably about 2.5, 3 years ago, when it wasn't even, cloud wasn't even condensation at that point. And we didn't know it was cloud. We just wanted a way of hosting our servers and making them accessible over the internet. And as a partner, InTechnology said, well, yeah, okay, there is a better way of doing things. Why don't you let us set up standard images for your servers, and you can spin them up, shut them down, do what you want, and we'll only charge you for what you use. And at the time, 2.5, 3 years ago, at the time, that was quite revolutionary because there was a contention amongst my peers in other construction companies that we were there to be fleeced by suppliers. And then we get a company that comes in and says, well, you know, obviously we want to make money. You know, we've got shareholders like everyone else, but we don't want to do it at the risk of a relationship that could actually work for both of us going forward. So we moved to private cloud. The essential elements of this were, well, basically it was down to building that relationship. As you can probably gather, this isn't a conversation about the technical aspects of cloud. You can get that anywhere else. I'm coming at this from a business perspective, and our business was very introverted, for want of a better term. We needed to make those bridges. We needed to start talking to people, and we needed to assert what we needed from that relationship. And then if the supplier decided that that didn't really fit in with where they wanted to go, then you know, there wasn't a fight on the playground about it. We sort of stepped back and said, okay, well, perhaps you know, we need to part company at this point. We're not going to try and force you to go in one direction, and similarly, you can't force us. We were quite fortunate because the people that we were dealing with were open to these ideas. They were bringing suggestions, and that started to build trust. And that was the main thing at the time, because it was fairly new. It was a fairly new thing to do. We were used to having servers that we could go and kick. Not that we would, but we could physically touch. And it wasn't just a question of geography. Our servers now reside 200 miles up the M1 from Birmingham. But it wasn't a question of geography. So, we spent a day putting a large jigsaw puzzle together. It's a really terrible photograph. It was the only one that I could find. It was about teamwork. Now, we had a number of meetings with the various people within our suppliers, the various sort of contacts that we would need to bring this together. I've already mentioned InTechnology. We use a finance system which is pretty much industry specific. And they are fairly niche, and it was something entirely new for them. And we got them talking to InTechnology. We got InTechnology talking to people we were using for elements of our email, and we started to get this sort of team vibe going on. And we had some very frank and open conversations at the beginning. sort of conversations we'd never had with suppliers before. And that was actually quite good because it broke down a number of barriers and we got to understand the dynamics of the personalities within that sort of environment. The plan. I'd like to say that this was sort of structured like the D-Day landings or the lunar landing. In hindsight, we stumbled on, anybody who's into systems thinking, we were pretty much running lean or the Vanguard method for our project. And it was driven by what our clients wanted. The infrastructure would sort itself out. We didn't want to commit to building an infrastructure which didn't provide the outputs that would enable our people to do what the clients wanted. Because ultimately, if the clients say, well, thanks a lot, it doesn't matter how fantastic our system is, we've got nobody to pay for it ultimately. So we got some of our more long-standing clients to be open and frank with us. And it was quite masochistic in a way. We said, right, come in and tell us why we're crap. What are we doing that doesn't fit with what you want? And that got filtered through to our suppliers, and they said, well, actually, you know, we could address this by doing this, we could address this by doing that. That idea is physically impossible, or whatever. And we could start to pull these things together. We also included, obviously, our people as well. They need to be a part of it because ultimately they're the ones operating it. And it came together, and it wasn't structured on Microsoft Project or Primavera or whatever. It was a more organic thing, and that prevented the owner of the project plan from being God. And we all moved forward in step. It was quite refreshing. Right, the result. Well, we moved to a centralised document management system. We had silos of information dotted all around the country, and what we'd found was that historically we would have a project in, say, our Sheffield office, and they would be working on the marina in Ipswich. We don't have an office in Suffolk, but our nearest office was in London, and it's only a jaunt up the A14 or the A11 or whatever. But if somebody in London needs to work on that project, they couldn't access the data in Sheffield, which, okay, is a bit of a pain. But we're starting to get national instructions. We did a lot of work with LowCog. We are the project management stroke quantity surveyor of choice for Tesco. So I was in Prague recently, and it was quite nice to point out to my girlfriend, she loved every second of this, me pointing out, we did that Tesco, and I know the guy who project manages, she loved it, sort of. Kept saying shut up for some reason. But we could bring all this together in a document management system, and instead of having to have a RAS session or VPN or whatever, centralised document management system. I'm preaching to the converters, I fully appreciate this, but this was new when we were doing it for us. It meant that this Ipswich Marina project, if somebody from Sheffield couldn't get there, someone from London could pick up the baton, have the information and go straight there and deal with it. It made us more flexible to deal with our client base. We've gone for a managed email service. RLB has over 100 offices across the globe. We came together about 4 or 5 years ago from 2 large practices in Asia Pac and Australasia, I should say. They have minimal IT support, but they still have a fairly reasonable sort of IT requirement. So we've gone for a managed email service, which means that effectively we can invite them to join onto our managed service, and they can start to reap the benefits of not having to train people how to set up an email account or whatever. That can all be done centrally. It also means that our guys can access email whenever they like. We have an office in Saudi Arabia, and anyone who knows anything about the Middle East knows that their weekend's out of sync with the UK. Well, they have their own weekends, it's not out of sync with the UK. We're out of sync with them, I suppose. And I really don't want my guys to be sitting there on a Saturday or Sunday waiting for a phone call from somebody from Saudi Arabia saying, his email down. You know, my team operates office hours. We don't want to pay them anymore. That's why we've got managed services to do this. So we can offer email services to our Saudi Arabian colleagues and not have to worry about picking up the baton of support. This is our London flagship office. As I mentioned earlier, it's not the head office, and that is a source of so much frustration to them. It's untrue. They're in London, they think they should be the head office. What that doesn't show is how small the office is in comparison to the previous office space we had. Anyone who's sort of based in London will know more than I do the cost of office space in London. This is sort of just off Liverpool Street. We've managed to shrink the size of the office because we have made home working so much more of a viable proposition. During the Olympics, the only thing that was equipped, especially in the London office, was I think we had 10 sleeping bags just in case someone was caught and couldn't get back home. Most people worked away from the office. This isn't rocket science, I fully appreciate that. I know that there have been solutions in place for pretty much as long as there have been telephone lines and computers. But what we've done is we've given them an office working environment which is seamless. They have access to everything they want. They don't even have to log in. It's there. Yeah, they log into the laptop, but once they're into the laptop, they're into an environment where they can get to the services they want. Which leads on to this. We are a small client of Vodafone, but we're probably the most pain in, well, PITA, I'll use that acronym, you can work that one out for yourself, client. We were one of the first to get 3G because basically we hammered the door down on Vodafone. We have moved to Vodafone's OneNet solution so that your phone is your desk phone, your mobile phone, you can use it interchangeably. This has all come out of our move to cloud because once you start attacking the holy cows of your business, you start to think of more flexible ways of working, and that's what we found. We start to say, well, why can't people use their landline out of the office? And Vodafone had sort of whispered that they had a solution. And we said, okay, well, let's take that, we want to run with that. Which led to another trip to Prague for me, which was great. You know, it's fine because I'd rolled it out in the Czech Republic first. But we jumped on that immediately, and for a short time we were the largest deployment of OneNet in the UK. It's almost like the largest construction consultancy in the solar system. We were the largest in the UK because we were effectively the only deployment they had at the time. The lawyers, apologies to any lawyers in the room, the lawyers welcomed it because effectively what we'd done by moving to managed services, we'd actually rubber stamped a lot of the compliance issues that we had found and that we perhaps had, trying to think of a politically correct phrase, not necessarily danced around, but we'd sort of nod and a wink, we said that we were compliant and we weren't entirely sure. We are now. And the beauty of moving with a managed service provider is that we sort of pick up the benefits of everybody else who needs this sort of compliance, and that sort of compliance, we get it almost through the back door, which works wonderfully for us on bids. Because typically you'll have, right, slight digression, I had an email through a few weeks ago from a university to contribute to bid material, and they wanted to know whether we had systems in place to deal with the Millennium Bug. It's like, okay, how often do you review your bid criteria? But we can rubber stamp pretty much any sort of bid information that comes in. We do a lot of work with places that have got security considerations, places like the Atomic Weapons Establishment. They tend to be quite touchy about where their information resides, which led to, as you've probably seen from the other stands out there, it led to us picking a sort of UK-based supplier. It all helps with the compliance. Our data doesn't leave UK shores. And we do a lot of work for the prison service, and they're quite chuffed with that as well. It is for us, it's a deal breaker, because if we were to go to one of the public cloud providers, we probably could, well, we wouldn't be able to work for the public sector. The benefits. We have saved quite a bit of money. We don't have speculative kit lying around for the project that we were going to do, but then we found out that it was a bit difficult or didn't quite fit what we wanted. We are seeing an economy of scale. Not ours, but the fact that we're part of a bigger club and we're sharing resources with 10, 20, 5,000, I don't know how many other companies. So we pay a smaller percentage of that. We're not paying a full sort of capital investment on kit. It's allowed me to look at the makeup of the team and challenge my staff to think differently, to train differently. We have improved morale in the team, because they're not just going to the loading bay, picking up a cardboard box full of server equipment and then spending the afternoon elbow deep in the chassis of a server. They can spin up a server, try something out, say, what do you reckon to this, boss? Don't like it, shut it down. Do like it, implement it. Obviously, with all the various things in between. That's a very shorthand way of putting it across. But it's given the business, from the IT practitioners all the way up to our technical quantity surveying, building surveying staff, some flexibility and some dynamism and some real sort of blue sky thinking. And we're saving money. Final analysis. It was quite scary to begin with. As I mentioned, it was 2.5, 3 years ago. We were doing something that was outside of our comfort zone, but we found that by investing time with our suppliers and making those relationships, and they wanted to have a good cloud type project on their books so they could go out and establish further relationships and sell further services. Everyone was pulling together, and so you get that nice warm fuzzy feeling that everybody's pulling in the same direction. I've been in IT management for years, and I wish something like this had been available years ago, something other than mainframes. I know that we've been running virtual servers and whatever on mainframes, but this has been a game changer for my business. And I really wish we had an opportunity to implement something like this before. As I say, this wasn't a technical discourse. If you've come in here expecting me to talk about binary offsets and RAID arrays and God knows what, then I'm sorry I've wasted your time, but this is the effect that it's had on our business. And as the final slide says, the end. But is it ever? What's next? Thanks for your time.